Hello, and welcome to episode 33 of Expertise is Overrated, the podcast that takes the time to answer the questions you didn't know you didn't want the answer to. I'm Sean.
And I'm Vib, and neither of us has any clue what we're talking about. Before we move on, let's award the much vaunted Expertise is Overrated Tinfoil Award.
As a reminder, this is an award that we give out at the start of each episode to the person who had the most ridiculous point in last week's episode. I'm not sure this one even is a point, though, because my point was correct.
It's. I think it's probably a first for us. It's that you didn't back your own point, which is almost criminal on this show.
It was ridiculous. So, in our most recent episode, where we were talking about why Star Wars is crap and why that doesn't matter, I made the claim that the plot of... This isn't a contentious claim, it's sort of just repeating stuff that I've read elsewhere on the internet, but the plot of A New Hope is just the plot of Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. And then after saying that, there was a moment of silence, and then I went, wait, I'm not convinced it was Kurosawa that made that. And I just completely backed out of my point, which was frustrating.
I'm going to claim that, I think, because I sort of made a noise of, really? Kurosawa?
Yeah, and as it turns out, Akira Kurosawa did indeed make the 1958 film The Hidden Fortress. So...
Yeah. So you did not back your own opinion on Expertise is Overrated.
I can't believe that this is where we've got to.
So in other news, I am looking for a new co-host. Please send applications to Expertise.
I'd like to tender my resignation.
I mean, what's amazing is that you got the tinfoil for not backing yourself in a hot take episode about Star Wars.
In a hot take episode about Star Wars, where neither of us committed fully to the hot take as well.
Yeah, that was bad, wasn't it? That was bad. Really. Maybe we should both just find replacements for ourselves.
Yeah, if anyone is, in possession of a USB microphone and reckons that you could do the job of two idiot co-hosts on a podcast talking about nothing of import, let us know.
Yeah, please. Everything's up and running. All you need to do is just record. No. We're mistakes happen. Mistakes were made. We'll move on.
I'd say lessons were learned, but they weren't.
No, they never are.
So just very quickly, we've decided that in the interest of keeping the episodes moving and keeping the content of episodes relevant to people listening to them, we're going to shelve doing sort of fortnightly feedback on just random text messages that we've received from our friends. We're still very keen to receive feedback, though, so do keep it coming. And what we'll do is we'll save it up and then either do, short filler episodes or what have you, where we just go through some of the things that people have said, or if we have particularly meaningful bits of feedback that would, transcend the topics at hand, then we will deal with them and chat about them. But we're not just going to go, we received a text message from Justine that said that Sean's an idiot, because I'm fed up of that.
Yeah, I mean, because that's 99% of what we were receiving. But I feel that the feedback now is actually quite constructive, and people are venturing out into the realms of their own opinions, and they're worth discussing it in much more detail.
If you just last point on the feedback that we weren't going to talk about, if you want to talk about these episodes, the best place to do so is probably our Discord server. We have a channel there dedicated to talking about these episodes, and conversations happen there that don't even involve either of us, which is really exciting to see.
Indeed. But let's move on.
moving past that.
Moving on from the feedback we weren't going to do.
So today, there's been a lot of press in the last few weeks. At the time that you're listening to this, probably about a month or so, 6 weeks ago, about Amazon's upcoming series entitled The Rings of Power. And I think it's fair to say, would you agree, that Twitter is more or less divided right down the middle as to whether or not this is going to be good or not?
Actually, last I sort of looked at it, it was very firmly in favour of this is going to be a train wreck.
I see, that's interesting, because I've seen lots of people saying that, except for... I'm going to call them content creators, but I'm not sure that's quite the right term. Like people who actually seem to know what they're talking about Tolkien. This might be
Yeah.
unfair, but I've seen lots of people saying that it's going to be a train wreck, and I think we should have a bit of a chat about it. But
yeah, I mean, I guess this is partly my issue with it, because I got so fed up with, off the back of one single trailer, the arguments that people were starting to get into were just completely baffling to me.
yes,
there was essentially just a whole bunch of people going, "Oh, well, this is shit, isn't it? Blah 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 blah.
yeah,
What's the point?" And then a whole other set of arguments about diversity and equality, and people getting into all sorts of weird things that, I mean, I guess it is in keeping with the zeitgeist, but if your entire criticism of a trailer can come down to there are no black elves, then quite frankly, go fuck yourself.
I'm glad you said it, not me. And to be fair, we've sort of covered that ground in our episode on the Wheel of Time as well. So rather than rehashing it there, just going to point people back to what we said. I think in like the closing 10, 15 minutes of that episode. Listen to the whole episode though; it was good.
It just takes away from the actual conversation, and
I think
I'm in
that's
no
right.
mood to argue with people who are just inherently bad.
Other than me.
Other than you, but that's just my punishment in life, apparently. Because what I thought, and hopefully agree with me, the argument I wanted to get into about that particular trailer was that there were actual things that worried me, that weren't just, oh, the elves don't look the way I expect them to.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of where the sort of general direction I want to steer in when talking about adaptations in general, is an adaptation can be good even if you don't like the visual style of the adaptation, I think. But there are other things that perhaps matter, well, not perhaps, that do matter a lot more. And things like tone. But yeah, I have to say, I watched the very first trailer for Rings of Power and I got very excited by it. But then all the conversations on Twitter and Reddit and Facebook, I imagine, and all of these other wonderful chat rooms. Do we still talk about chat rooms?
No, I think you've just
I've just
outed
aged
our
myself.
age there.
Well, no, all of these
on IRC,
discussions.
people were talking on the forums.
On MSN Messenger, I was having a conversation. No, all of this various discussion fora. I just got really tired, like you, of, oh no, how is there such and such? This doesn't look right. Blah 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 blah. When that, like you, that's not the conversation that I think is interesting. Like the conversation to me is, are the showrunners, the creators, staying true to, is it the message? That's not quite right, but like the tone, the actual stories that Tolkien was trying to tell.
Yeah.
And I think
I sort of agree with you. So what exactly do you mean by the sort of visual style of an adaptation?
So I think what do I mean by the visual style of an adaptation? The visual style is a stylistic choice, I guess. So it wouldn't be for me, but it would be entirely possible to make an animated adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, for example. That would be,
in fact, the original adaptation.
The original adaptation is animated, you're absolutely right, but there is a, quote, perfect adaptation because it fully captures everything that Tolkien was trying to do when he was writing The Lord of the Rings. And I wouldn't like it because I don't like anime. I don't like anime as a rule. I just don't. But I would be able to recognize that if it kept the tone, if it kept the themes, if it kept the overarching story, etc., the feel, then the fact that it's been portrayed in a way that is not for me is fine. And I just, does that make sense?
Yes. It's interesting, and not to bring this back to another previous episode of ours, but it almost feels like you're kind of contradicting your own views on not necessarily stereotypes, but maybe archetypes.
I don't think I am.
I think you might be, but
because
we might leave that to another episode. That you're just an enigma.
No, there's a distinction there, because an archetype is a tool that the audience can use to hang assumptions on. So
fine. But so okay. So when it comes to the Rings of Power, what did you like about it? What made you excited?
I'm trying to remember the trailer.
Did you start recording this episode not having recently rewatched the trailer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that we were rewatching the Ring of Power trailer before we started. You should have checked.
I mean, I also didn't rewatch it.
There's a slow motion arrow shot that I didn't like. But
okay, so we're talking that level of visual style.
Yeah. The cinematography as opposed to set design.
Okay, yeah. In which case, I agree with you. But then, okay. So why were you excited rather than skeptical, as I was?
Quite probably because of how much I liked the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Peter Jackson trilogy. So the idea of being able to dive back into that world, to explore bits of it that we haven't seen on screen before, was exciting. But I was excited for The Hobbit. I think this is potentially where we differ. I was excited for the Hobbit films.
Me too.
Oh.
Me too, but the Hobbit films are precisely why the trailer scared me a little bit, and the slow motion arrow shot is one of the reasons. The other is that shot of her, one presumes Galadriel, is sort of hanging off the cliff edge. It just looked a little bit like bad CGI. That was my main worrying take home from that trailer.
No, that's fair.
Which is much more Hobbit than Lord of the Rings, right?
Yes, and there's all sorts of interesting reasons why the CGI in The Hobbit doesn't work. A lot of it coming down to the film, like literally the type of film that they shot it on.
Yeah. It was like one of the first experiments with higher frame rates or something.
It's a frame rate distinct. I think the Lord of the Rings was shot at essentially 24 FPS or something like that, and then the Hobbit was shot at maybe double that, or something in those ranges, and it just looks weird to the human eye because we're used to watching films at a lower frame rate and slightly grainier and all of that.
It's like uncanny valley territory.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's some elements of the Rings of Power trailer worried me purely from a visual perspective, and I thought
that's fair,
because in The Hobbit it does detract a little bit.
But it does. But for me, the problem with The Hobbit, that problem is overlookable if the core films were better.
Yeah.
So things like the CGI being bad in The Hobbit are a problem, and they would always be a problem. But if they had just essentially done what Peter Jackson did with Lord of the Rings, except shot it on that new weird film with crap CGI, you'd go, oh, that's a bit disappointing that the CGI is not as good. But at least the core film is good, and you can look past bad CGI because people do it all the time.
I mean, to be honest with you, I still kind of do with The Hobbit because I love the source material so much. I don't hate those films. I'm disappointed by those films.
I agree with you. I don't have the same level of vitriol for those films that others do. I have a lot of disdain for a studio that looked at the however many pages there are in The Hobbit. It's out of reach, but whatever, it's 250 pages of The Hobbit, and went, we can spin that into 3 films, each about as long as Return of the King. Like that was just bad design decision.
And I think that's the first key concept in this discussion on adaptations, right? Is that So the Hobbit suffers for many reasons. One being that it obviously came after Lord of the Rings, which was, let's be under no illusions here, a masterpiece.
It was. Someone I was listening to recently described the Lord of the Rings films as perfect as a trilogy, which is a very, very strong claim. But I think there might be something to it in terms of hitting exactly the right moment in time and delivering so exceptionally well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think insofar that, well, as much as I know, I think most of the Lord of the Rings fans like it. I mean, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. I love it. So,
I
frankly,
know. I know
any other
some
opinion
people
can go
who.
fuck itself. But
I know of some people who don't like some of the changes made.
sure,
In particular, the
Helm's Deep.
Helm's Deep, which I can understand, and Gandalf at Minas Tirith, the Witch King's Are, which again I understand.
Oh, that I hate myself. To be honest, it's the one reason maybe not to watch the extended editions is that one scene.
Yes, I think that's probably fair, but that, like you say, that's only in the extended editions. That never made it on to the cinema screen.
Yeah.
I always watch the extended editions, but there's definitely some filler in there.
Yeah.
But no, so I'm a massive fan of the Lord of the Rings film.
But I think, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, the Lord of the Rings, I think, makes sense to have 3 films because it mimics the three, volumes of the Lord of the Rings.
Sorry, volumes.
And it's a long story. The Hobbit is a beautiful little novel.
The Hobbit's a kid's book, and this is sort of what I wanted to come on to. The tone of The Hobbit is a kid's book, and to be fair, An Unexpected Journey is mostly a kid's film. Like, it's a bit of a fun romp.
You say that there's a lot of really dark themes in there. You know,
there are dark
themes.
There are dark themes in The Hobbit as well. We shouldn't shy away. There are dark themes in all fairy tales, right? The fact that the themes are dark doesn't stop it being a kid's story.
Yeah, sorry, maybe themes was the wrong word to use, but they didn't mince the fact that people were beheaded and things like that.
The recap of the battle at Moria, for example, you're absolutely right. Is pretty heavy for a kids film, but it's quite fun. It's quite light-hearted. Yeah. It's a romp. Much like,
to be fair, that Battle of Moria thing is that they just completely made up, as far as I can tell.
It must be in an appendix somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure there was a battle, but I mean, correct.
It's not in The Hobbit.
Yeah, but I also don't know that Thrall was beheaded by an orc. That's entirely possible that he was.
I would have to look it up. But
no. So I think the Hobbit is a lesson in a sin of what not to do with adaptations. Is to go too far off of what should have been the real source material. Right. I like the fact that they went into the White Council because I think that's an important appendix in the greater story of the War of the Ring.
Yes,
it directly leads into sort of the events of the Lord of the Rings. So I don't mind that they included that in the films.
And the opening scene of Battle of the Five Armies, the Galadriel casting out the Necromancer, is really good. And you see Elrond and Saruman and Gandalf absolutely cutting loose, which is great. And then Galadriel turns up and absolutely shits on everyone, which is amazing.
Absolutely. But I think that's actually quite clever, right? Because I think it's fair to say that a lot of people really wanted to see characters like Galadriel and Elrond let loose, as you say, but that doesn't work if you make them fight orcs, because the power levels there are so imbalanced that then you sort of look at Thorin fighting orcs and you're like, well, this guy's a bit shit.
Well, it's really, it would be really hard to do Elrond fights orcs, and you get it a little bit in An Unexpected Journey, where he's part of the elven cavalry group that drive off the Warg Riders, but you don't realize it's Elrond. But then you're exactly right. You see him and Saruman and Galadriel fighting ghosts essentially, and dicking on them. And that, you're absolutely right, that serves to establish that these are beings that operate just on a completely different level of power, even from Thorin or Dwalin or any of the sort of dwarves that we've been with, who were like, hey, these guys can handle themselves. So I think that's right.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I always like to compare sort of in my head is, in the Two Towers when the Rohirrim ambushed the Uruk-hai.
Yes.
Those are, it's a relatively small force of orcs in Uruk-hai, but and they're ambushed at night and still 2 Rohirrim die. Whereas what looks like maybe 10 elves on some horses take care of an entire orc warg hunting pack with no casualties.
Yes.
So you can just see that there is a massive gulf in talent there, and I do really like that. That's a good scene, I find. But
the problem that the Hobbit suffers from is that in order to extend it to 3 films, they just end up shoehorning in a load of essentially unnecessary filler.
Oh, so much crap. I mean, you mentioned Battle of the Five Armies. Most of that film is unnecessary.
Yes. Because the Battle of the Five Armies is a chapter?
Well, it's hardly in the book, yeah, because
Bilbo gets knocked unconscious. So I forgot
that. Which they sort of pay homage to, like right at the end. See, like Bilbo gets knocked out. It's like, yeah, but that actually happens right at the very beginning.
Yeah, he just comes to at the end. I don't. There are so many reasons why the Hobbit films don't work, but I think it's fair to say that the core reason why they don't work, as compared with the Lord of the Rings, is there is less fidelity to the source material. Simply.
Yeah, and there's an argument to be made that obviously Peter Jackson had far less time to work on The Hobbit than he did Lord of the Rings, so we have to kind of take that into account.
Yeah, but he also didn't want to make the films to begin with.
Yes. Certainly not 3 of them.
Certainly not 3 of them. And I heard a rumor that they didn't do any pre-production on the Hobbit films. They just went straight to filming, which, if true,
it was a shit show, and I think you're right to blame the studios more than anything else.
I think I am. I think I feel comfortable in saying that was New Line.
Yeah, I think we can blame them, no problem. Oh, good. Some sort of siren is going off in the background. Fantastic.
Amazing.
So have fun listening to that, dear listeners. No, but so bringing it back to then the Rings of Power, what worries me a little bit, right, is, as we've talked about, is the source material.
Because there's not a lot to go on.
No, especially because they don't have the rights to any of the stuff that would be, easily translatable. So they don't have rights to the Silmarillion, for example, which if you're going to set a TV show in like the Second Age, or First Age even, I actually don't remember what age they're setting.
Ring of Power is Second Age. Rings of Power is Second Age. Because it's like Numenor and all that. It's Numenor and Anatar and Celebrimbor and the forging of the Rings of Power.
Yeah. Which, you can see why they do that. It's again leading up to Lord of the Rings, so I think that will resonate well with people. Celebrimbor was very popular in the video game series, Shadow of War and stuff.
Yeah, and it is, for all that we've got, young Elrond, young Galadriel, Celebrimbor, Anatar, Ar-Pharazôn, all of these big characters, it's still more grounded than the insanity of the First Age.
Absolutely.
Which would be much easier to
it creates problems, right? Because you're talking about young Elrond, young Galadriel, but these people, they're not young in the Second Age by any stretch of the imagination, right? But I think this is sort of where potential concern starts to build. Where are they going with this? Why did they decide that they had to pick a character that actually exists with a fully written backstory in the canon.
You mean Galadriel?
Yeah. Why not just make up an elf and
because if they've made up someone, the internet would be screaming about the fact that they've invented a character when there is the whole back canon of Tolkien that they could have plucked a character from.
Yeah, but then there's no winning, right?
Well, no, that's sort of the point that I'm making. There's no winning, because if you pick Galadriel or Elrond, then the problem that you have is that people are going to complain that your adaptation isn't true to the source material. And if you create someone, then people are going to complain that you've created someone rather than picking someone from the source material. So you can't win. So you just have to pick the people that you think are able to tell the best story.
See, I don't know about that. So using again the example of Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, right? Video games with the Lord of the Rings license, set in I guess that is the Third Age. Yeah, it must be the Third Age.
I think so.
Yeah, because Sauron is gone, and that's introducing a brand new character, sort of merging him with an existing character, or rather their ghost, which
in a way that is just makes no sense.
Yeah, but I think I want to say that landed quite well. I mean, I don't have any figures to hand because let's be honest.
I think there were successful games from a selling video games standpoint. I don't know how they're considered by sort of Tolkien fans, if you like, as opposed to just video game fans.
They're probably more forgiving in that context. I mean, I know I am, right? Because you get to run around in the world and kill some orcs, which
true
we all want to do.
And you are also just playing Aragorn.
How can you say that?
Well, no, you're not. Obviously, Talion is not Aragorn. I'm not suggesting that he is, but he's a ranger who uses a two-handed sword and a bow and runs around killing the shit out of orcs. And he looks like Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn. Like there's some deliberate design decisions been made there, I think.
Perhaps, but I mean, the generic Gondorian has a type.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm just sort of poking at the idea. You're right though. They're obviously not exactly the same.
No, my point is that's an adaptation where they took a serious creative license and were like, okay, we're going to set it here and we're just going to make some shit up in it. And I think it works, even if you try to sort of canonize that.
But
it works because they picked a time period where it doesn't really matter what happens. You
can't screw around.
People are messing around with rings and stuff. It doesn't really fundamentally affect the story. Whereas touching a character like Galadriel, that's risky.
True. This is spoilers for Shadow of War, but didn't they make Isildur one of the ring wraiths in Shadow of War?
Ooh, did they?
I think they did. I think they made Isildur and Helm Hammerhand ring wraiths. Because you fight the ring wraiths in Shadow of War.
Oh, I don't recall. If so, that is amazing.
Nor do I. But I mean, that's directly contrary to the canon. But I think you're right. I think there is people. You could be more forgiving of those changes in a video game, but also in something that's like, look, we're not at. This makes no attempt to be true to the canon. Maybe it could have happened, but it doesn't impact the canon in any way. And they're not adapting something. They didn't take a story like The Hobbit or The Silmarillion or The Lord of the Rings and go, here's our take on it. They went, thanks for building the world, JRR. We're going to go off and piss around in this corner of it. Nothing that we do is going to impact anything else. So
exactly,
I think that's different from an adaptation like The Rings of Power.
It is, but as you say, then if for example they did say, "Oh, Isildur's a ring wraith," then they've fucked something up, and that's the danger that Rings of Power has as well. Is that they can take Galadriel and all of a sudden create this gigantic plot hole.
There's also a cynical reason for why they'd pick Galadriel.
Go on.
I don't think that this is the reason, but we are in an era where female leads are doing well in on screen.
Yes.
I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. But that's another reason why you'd pick Galadriel rather than Elrond or Elros, for example, to be your lead.
And if you're going to pick a female character in the greater Tolkien area, then Galadriel's kind of all you've got.
Yeah. If you're doing the second age, you have to pick Galadriel, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could do Arwen. Or you go big and you go for Luthien, but...
Well, Luthien's... The problem is Luthien's first age.
Yeah, Luthien's first age is very true. Plus, there'd be riots in the streets, I think.
Okay, imagine trying to cast Luthien.
Yeah, can't be done.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot... There's a lot pointing in favor of picking Galadriel as your sort of main character. I think we might need to come back to the Rings of Power once we work out perhaps what makes other adaptations good or bad, so we can then apply that to Rings of Power and see what we think is going to happen.
Plus, we should really reserve judgment until Rings of Power is actually out, as opposed
this is also the point, right? You can make a prediction, but you can't judge it until you've seen it.
I know it's surprisingly sober reasoning for this show, but
yeah, I'm fed up seeing people screaming about it on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh my god, they made Galadriel into a warrior. Go and read the books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but so the comparison Lord of the Rings versus Hobbit, I think, is the easy one, and I strongly suspect that a series that's guilty of kind of doing what The Hobbit did is one that we have covered on the show previously, which is Harry Potter.
Yes. Apologies for the ice cream van.
It's all happening today.
Wow, we are professionals. Harry Potter, though. Harry Potter. I think that's a really good one to call out. Because say what you like about the Harry Potter films, and I like them all.
Ugh.
Ish. I'm not sure like is the right word. But the first ones are so much, but the first 2 or 3 are so much better than the later ones, I think.
Yeah.
Something changes in the way that they do the adaptations.
Yeah. It's a completely mixed bag. So, I mean, the first 3 almost follow the story line for line.
Almost.
And it kind of works out, right? Because the books are short enough.
Yes.
And then you get this weird situation where they decided that Deathly Hallows should be 2 films. And then the longest books that are in the middle, which are arguably the most interesting,
just get
character development and whatnot. They just... I mean, Goblet of Fire is a complete travesty of a film.
That's an absolute train wreck of a film.
They're like, here's the 4 things that need to happen, and we'll just string them together.
You genuinely... this can't actually be true, but it feels like you genuinely jump from Triwizard Tournament, Yule Ball, Triwizard Tournament, Graveyard?
Pretty much, yeah.
Non-stop. No chance to catch your breath. No chance to explore what's actually happening to these characters. And it's just... They're just so bad.
It doesn't work in Goblet of Fire for that reason. Order of the Phoenix, I think they got a bit lucky because a lot of that book is... You sit in Harry's head and he's going through some wild puberty.
That he goes through the most puberty.
all the puberty. So I think in terms of adaptation of that book, they got away with it. And then they lose the plot, in my opinion, in Half-Blood Prince, where they just introduce so much random nonsense that's completely unnecessary. Like, what is that whole thing about with the opening thing in the cafe, where he's hitting on this random muggle?
That was so good. I actually think, right, put that scene in a different film, and I love that scene.
Well, because it's Daniel Radcliffe being awkward.
It's Daniel Radcliffe being an awkward... What must he have been? 16, 17-year-old teenage boy having a conversation with a teenage girl where he knows that he's essentially in with a chance and he doesn't have a fucking clue what to do. And that is excellent. I love that. But it just doesn't fit in the rest of the film.
It doesn't fit in the rest of the film. It also just does not fit in Harry's.
It also doesn't fit Harry. I get that. But you can make that scene work as Harry Potter trying to be normal.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna argue that you could never make that scene work, but I'm just saying it doesn't work.
It doesn't. No, you're absolutely right. It doesn't work.
And what's worse about it is that the way that the book is written, that opening few chapters about Dumbledore coming and the interaction he's got with the Dursleys and all that, that's fantastic. And then they were like, let's not do any of that and instead have this bizarre thing in a tube station cafe.
There are also no cafes like that in any tube station in London.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Dumbledore, the sort of, one of the key people, one of the key wizarding figures just blatantly almost disregarding the statute of secrecy.
Pop. Yeah, it's just
why? Of all the great source material you have to hand, why did you decide to do that,
Yeah. But I think you're right. With Harry Potter specifically, I think you're right that the first three work because they stick so closely to the text. And where they deviate from the text, they deviate essentially for necessity of different medium.
Yes.
Right? Because they recognized what they had in the text. And say what, I know there's a lot of debate now about how good the writing of Harry Potter actually is, but those are solid books that it's very easy to make a film out of because the books are so cinematic.
Yeah.
Although, so I asked my wife about Harry Potter earlier, and she said that she thought one of the reasons why the first three films are the best is that the first three books are the best, which might help. Because they're shorter, they're self-contained stories, you don't have much of the extraneous sort of what's going on in the wizarding world, but also you still have the Harry Potter's wide-eyed excitement at this new world, which starts to drop off after about book 5, where he just becomes this angry, jaded teenage boy.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment. I don't necessarily think I see it that way, but I think that's a fair assessment. Essentially, the sort of idea is if you're not really invested in Harry's story come book 4 and 5, then
yeah, that makes
that
sense.
wide-eyed nature goes away as you
get off the train, because that's all we're doing from here.
Yeah. But in terms of the films as well, I feel they just lose the plot more and more, and it's really hard to understand why. I mean, the biggest crime, and I will never ever get over this, it's almost on par with Gandalf's staff breaking, is the final showdown between Harry and Voldemort.
Oh, I hate that.
It just really emphasizes that the filmmakers had no clue what that whole relationship, that whole fight was about.
They didn't understand the central message of the book, I think. Because the ending for Voldemort is meant to be
mundane.
Exactly. That's exactly the right
word in the book.
That's exactly the word. He's just a nobody at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's, say what you will about J.K. Rowling, but I think that line for me will always take it like his body hit the ground with a mundane finality.
Yes,
that's how she says it, and I think that's so elegant. Because all that happens is they cast one spell at each other.
They have a bit of
Voldemort's
chat.
just there, and critically, his body's just there.
Yeah, because he's not special. He's not that special at the end of the day.
Whereas in the film, they're fighting each other in the courtyard, having slapped each other a bit, and then he disintegrates for whatever reason.
He disintegrates. But a huge problem that you have in Harry Potter is that they changed the way the magic works from film to film. So you get to a stage where, like, all wizards are capable of doing that. I forget what it's called, but where their wands connect and they like
Yeah.
shoot lava at each other. I just no that's a Harry and Voldemort thing because they're special. And
Yeah, but this is an interesting one though, because I've often thought about this. So the ones connecting, yeah, that's shit. But I in terms of translating the duels and the kind of magical fights that occur in the books to the screen, I think they had to do something along those lines. Otherwise,
Order of
it
the
wouldn't work.
Phoenix does it well, though. The duel in the Department of Ministries in Order of Phoenix, duels in Order of the Phoenix work well, and they don't have it there.
They don't have the connecting so much, but they still just have a very basic. They're shooting bits of light at each other and deflecting bits of light.
Yeah, and I think that's fine as a way of doing it. The only other way you can do it is like the Dumbledore and Voldemort duel in the same film.
Yeah,
And that must have just taken so much time to animate.
yeah, I love that duel in the books, and in the films, it's a little weird. It's almost over the top.
Yeah, it is.
That's also partly because the way Michael Gambon acts Dumbledore
I don't.
is not how I would see him. But
is it heresy to say I don't like Michael Gambon's Dumbledore?
No, because I agree with you.
I mean,
there's the Goblet of Fire meme, and I think that exemplifies.
That's directing. That's not acting. But Gambon is portraying that as he was told to. That's script writing or directing. Sure. But also, yeah. And the problem is we had Richard Harris for 2 films.
Yeah, who I think was a better Dumbledore, but
he could never have done Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah, exactly.
Half-Blood Prince Dumbledore.
Exactly. I mean, Dumbledore must be a very hard character to translate to screen, right? Because he's an old man who's really not old in any meaningful metric.
Yeah.
Like physically and in terms of skills. So
the only person who I think you could have realistically got to do it was Ian McKellen, but he's just playing Gandalf.
Well, he's playing. He also he went on record, right, to say that he would not have taken the role of Dumbledore.
Did he? I didn't know. Harris. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I really should have fact-checked this. So this is maybe massive tinfoil grounds, but because Richard Harris was an outspoken homophobe,
feels of a generation where that could be true.
Yeah, Ian McKellen was like, "No, I'm not having that." But also in part, like, I wouldn't want to go against Richard Harris's interpretation and legacy when it comes to Dumbledore by then taking over as a gay man. There's a whole thing there, which I really hope I haven't made up, because that would be wild.
Yeah, looks like it was a lie. Off a very, very quick Google, looks like it was a lie, but it maybe wasn't.
Well, we shall
maybe McKellen, but even if you never have Richard Harris, it's such a hard role to portray. I think Jude Law is actually doing it really well in the Fantastic Beasts films.
Yeah, but I mean,
they have a whole other bunch of problems that we're not going to go into today, other than you can't adapt a textbook into 5 films.
Yeah, I mean, way to ruin a universe. That should be an episode. Yeah, how to ruin a universe.
Yeah, they're just not good.
No, but I think, yeah, late versus early Harry Potter is a very interesting lesson in how to adapt and not how to not adapt.
Yeah,
and both of those have the source material, right? That's the weird thing about it.
Yeah, because they're not like our next example. I don't think, which is Game of Thrones. But just to finish off on Harry Potter, like if people are going to the cinema to watch a Harry Potter film, they're going to watch J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter put on screen. They're not going to watch Chris Columbus or whoever it is, their interpretation of Harry Potter. They want as close to what they have in their head as possible put on screen.
Yeah.
I think. And those books the dialogue is snappy. The dialogue is almost written like it could go straight into a screenplay. So
Yeah.
just do that.
Yeah, and just and this is, I think, why Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings was such a masterpiece, because there was such obvious care and dedication
Yes,
and love of the source material, um, that kind of just goes out the window with the Harry Potter ones
I think that's right. And with the Hobbit.
and with the Hobbit, like even basic things. And this actually isn't, I think, the third Harry Potter film. Like, you see some witches and wizards just doing wandless magic. Like that's like a big thing. That doesn't really ever happen in the
Yeah,
books, where you see wizards and witches do that. And it's just like one of those little things.
yeah. Understand what you're adapting.
Yeah, yeah. So Harry Potter, it's a real shame, because I absolutely adore those books. But when it comes to those films, I do struggle
Yeah,
a bit.
so do I. So do I.
So yes, Game of Thrones. Um,
This is an interesting one because it's another series that starts really well and are
ends
running.
even better,
I
arguably.
was going to say are if we step outside the truth that the Game of Thrones season 8 was flawless and accept the internet meme that it was not.
Okay, we're gonna go with the internet on this. Okay,
We're going to go with the internet on this because the internet is
Rogue.
where we put out this podcast. So in order to get traction, we have to agree with them sometimes. But it does dip, and it dips in theory after they lose the books in terms of timing. But the interesting thing for me is that it deviates from the books a lot quicker than that in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something interesting there where it was all right deviating from the books if it still had sort of the books as a star to sail by. But once it lost that, its quality went off the rails so quickly.
So when you say deviate from the books, I'm assuming you mean in terms of the bigger picture.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, in terms of sort of the details and stuff, like various characters. I mean, because the A Song of Ice and Fire is gigantic, right? So
Yes.
so there's no way you can adapt that without making some
No,
sacrifice.
you'd have to cut. You have to make sacrifices. I'm never going to castigate an adaptation for making sacrifices and changes for the sake of getting something on the screen. That's just how it has to happen. But I think if you're going to make those changes and sacrifices, you have to understand the work that you're adapting well enough to know what the knock-on impact of your changes are. And actually, I know we're talking about Game of Thrones, but another adaptation that springs to mind as I talk about this is: did you ever see the Eragon film?
No, no.
You lucky man.
Well, yeah. So I hear.
It was bad, and it was bad for a whole bunch of reasons. But a big one in my mind was that the creators didn't seem to understand the source material well enough to make changes and understand what the knock-on impact of those changes would be.
Is that not the same line of reasoning as with the Golden Compass?
I think it is. I think it is exactly
Yeah.
the same line of reasoning with the Golden Compass. Actually, that's a really good
like
example.
like two lessons in how not to adapt source material.
Yes,
And
yes,
also, so much so that those franchises didn't ever really get
they
off the ground.
died. Those adaptations killed those franchises.
Yeah.
And other than, I think we were really lucky to get a BBC adaptation of His Dark Materials.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They just looked at that and went, we have to rescue this.
We've got to do something, and I'd quite like someone to try and pick up the Inheritance cycle and have another run at it, because it's better than any 14-year-old has any right to write. But
Yeah. But so Game of Thrones, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, they must have gone into that thinking, okay, we have source material, we have George R. Martin on side.
yes,
He's going to tell us, presumably, roughly how it's supposed to end.
he did. He allegedly he told the showrunners the core ending points that they had to put in.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely. I don't know that we've ever had confirmed exactly what those are. Those core ending points.
Yeah, and this is an example where the adaptation may, in fact, change what is to come. I don't know.
It's
I don't know if
possible.
that's necessarily true, but
I've certainly heard that suggested, that one of the reasons why the Winds of Winter is taking so long is that Martin is afraid to write the ending that he told Benioff and Wise because of how badly it was received.
yeah.
And if that's true, absolutely not. Write your fucking ending, you coward. But
So I think the interesting with the Game of Thrones television series is that they, as you know, they hired DB Weiss and David Benioff because they are absolutely phenomenal when it comes to making adaptations.
What had they done before? Everyone always says this. What have I forgotten that they've made?
I haven't got a clue. I'm just echoing.
You're just doing what I do and echoing what you've read. Yes. Good.
But I'm going to back myself.
Fair enough.
But by all accounts, they were absolutely phenomenal at adapting. And to be fair to them, they did a phenomenal job of adapting A Song of Ice and Fire into Game of Thrones, because that TV show was amazing. And then the source material ran out.
Yes, it's really good up till the Red Wedding.
Yeah. They start running out of some character story arcs, and they have to think about how to write characters, and you can tell that they have no clue how to do that.
Yeah. Yes, that you can tell that they were writing. I say the Red Wedding. I think it's probably the Purple Wedding, but like they were writing for that endpoint, basically. And they didn't. They were basically, I think, hoping that George was going to keep writing beyond.
I've often wondered that. Do you think that was sort of the original intent when they decided to make the TV show? Is that by the time they catch up, George will have written more books?
That was almost. I've from. I think it's the Notacast. One of the Game of Thrones podcasts, I'm sure, has said that it was essentially agreed that they'd have at least the Winds of Winter by the time they were making the final few seasons.
Right.
And then they just didn't, because George Martin has decided that he just doesn't like his fans, which, to be fair, is really funny. He's turned into a proper asshole.
I'm sure he always.
I'm sure. This is the thing. I'm sure he always was, but.
And I've always thought of him as the kind of guy who would write a lot and then just not bother finishing it, because he's like, sometimes you don't get what you want.
Have you read that interview where he basically goes, "Yeah, sucks to be you lot. I'm not finishing."
Yeah. No, that's just the way he rolls, right?
It's so funny. Yeah, it's so strange though with Game of Thrones, because even if you get into seasons 6, 7, and 8, you can see that there's still the kernels of a really good adaptation there, because dotted amongst those series there are phenomenally good individual episodes. Right, so Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the episode before the Battle of Winterfell, is one of my favourite Game of Thrones episodes ever. It's so good. And that also
Battle of Winterfell against the others.
Against the others,
yeah. That is a good episode, because that focuses so much on the characters, right?
Exactly. It's not about the spectacle, and I think the problem that Game of Thrones had was every time it became about the spectacle in the later series, they forgot everything else that they were doing.
But that episode almost is the undoing of so much of that season, because it is so good. And then they have the Battle of Winterfell, which is maybe one of the worst episodes of TV ever made.
It's really, really bad. I don't know. Didn't actually see it. It was too dark. Couldn't see a thing.
Well, yeah, one has to assume it was a terrible TV. And then they throw so much of that character building out the window again.
Yes, that's the real. They do Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and then you have the Battle of Winterfell, which happens, and then they do whatever the episode after Winterfell was called, where It's like Night of the Seven Kingdoms never happened.
Yeah.
All of that character development, exactly as you say, just goes straight out the window.
Yeah. But the crime of Game of Thrones is purely on Weiss and Benioff because they're just arseholes. Yes. They were too greedy to not take up whatever, was it Netflix first or Disney first that signed them for loads of money to do something which has never got off the ground because they fucking suck Disney. At their jobs.
It was Star Wars. They were going off to write Star Wars for Disney.
Yeah, which was never,
which never got off the ground because of how badly received season 8 was.
Yeah, but and they just have no original ideas. They're just shit writers.
I think that might also be true.
And ultimately, it's on them that there was only 8 seasons.
They were offered more. They were offered more by HBO. HBO said, "Do you want to make 10? Because this thing is printing us money." And they said, "No."
We also said, you need at least 9. Presumably based on where they were.
Yeah, and they went, "Nah, it's all right. We want the Disney money, thanks."
So again, a real lesson in how not to adapt any source material or just make any kind of TV show. That's just bad.
I think that's right. Game of Thrones wasn't bad because it was a bad adaptation. It was bad because it was just a bad TV show. I like that.
It's interesting, isn't it? So insofar that The Hobbit takes...
The Hobbit is a bad film.
Yeah, and it takes, a very... a finished, rounded, which is unusual in the world of Tolkien. It's actually a finished story. They take that and do way too much with it, way too much fluff, to then Game of Thrones, where they ran out of source material and just fucking ruined it.
The problem with Game of Thrones, and I feel like we can have this conversation because we're outside of our contention that season 8 is perfect. The problem with Game of Thrones was it's like you're saying, it did the opposite of what The Hobbit did. It had its core plot points. So, Battle of Winterfell, Mad Queen Dany, King Bran, basically. I'm assuming were the core plot points they wanted to hit in season 8.
Presumably, yeah.
And then so they went, okay, so we've got to do the Battle of Winterfell. So let's have that about episode 3, shall we say. So we'll just do 2 episodes before then. And then we've got to do Mad Queen Dany. So we'll do that 2 episodes after that. And then we'll do King Bran the episode after that. And there was no question of how do we get from A to B to C.
Yeah.
They're just plot points that just happen. And they don't do any work to build up Mad Queen Dany. Or they do, but they did it in seasons 2, 3, and 4 when Martin was doing the groundwork for them.
And the beauty of that, because presumably that's also where the books head.
I think that's where the books are going.
Yeah, and it's a favorite theory that a lot of people are like, well, she is crazy, or and then I think that's fine. They just don't bother with it.
No.
They're like, oh yeah, we forgot we had to make her crazy, so let's just
we forgot we had to make her crazy because she was a lot of people's favorite character. So doing her going crazy on screen was going to be pretty unpopular, so we didn't do it. And then her turn doesn't make sense.
Because... Well, they try to make it work, right? But just having her outside of King's Landing on her dragon,
but she just snapped.
Looking at Cersei, supposedly, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, now we believe that she's going mad.
But it's almost like she has a dissociative episode or something. It's like
it's so bad.
It's so badly done.
It's so bad. So I mean, there's really don't make adaptations like
make good films and make good TV.
Yeah. It's quite something, isn't it? A real lesson.
Yeah.
A real lesson. One that we've featured on this show previously.
Yes.
The reason I bring it up now is because I've actually read Eye of the World now, so the first book of A Wheel of Time.
Amazing.
I say I've read it. I was
had it read to you by the dulcet tones of Rosamund Pike.
And I mean, I defy anyone to say that that's a worse way of having consumed that particular form of media. So yes, having now read that book and having obviously seen season 1 of the Wheel of Time TV show,
yeah,
I sort of know where you're coming from, but I actually still think that first season is not an awful adaptation.
I don't think it's an awful adaptation. I think that there are specific points, specific changes were made, and this comes back. I think this is my Game of Thrones and Aragon point. There are specific changes made in the Wheel of Time TV show that are going to make their adaptation of, I don't know, Crossroads of Twilight or Tires of Midnight really difficult.
No, they essentially just have to cure Agelmar off screen, for example. I think they kind of
Yeah,
have
he's
to
not dead.
soft pedal on a lot of
You
things.
fix that by Agelmar not being dead. There are other ones that are harder, like the assertion that Moiraine is the only Aes Sedai strong enough to challenge Siwan, which just doesn't make sense. But like,
yeah, that's quite funny.
all of the changes are, I think, fixable, but they're going to have to expend time fixing the changes, or they're going to end up in the Game of Thrones problem where they've made so many little changes that they can't get to the end point. So
Well,
they either have to change the ending.
see, what I'm wondering, because I mean, I've heard, including from you, that, and I remember saying this to you, it's like, okay, I'm struggling with this book a little bit because you're kind of at the climax at the end of book one, right? And you wonder
Yes.
how does it get any worse than this? And I think the thinking is that it doesn't really. It's just many books of, there is still something coming.
The Dark One is still getting loose.
Yeah, it's like the dark one, something in the dark one,
Something Dark One.
and I wonder if the TV show made some of the changes it did because they were like, well, we can't make 20 seasons of this.
No, I don't. I think we'll get 4 or 5 seasons of Wheel
so
of
like
Time, to be honest
let's
with you.
expedite some of the things that
that's
happen,
right.
right? I suspect might be some of their logic.
And to be fair, what part of what they do is they change who the big bad is, right? So you get this rotating. It's almost a rotating cycle. It's quite clever, with the whole wheel imagery. But you go sort of. I'm not going to get the order right, but you get the Dark One, and then it's the Xian Shan, who you see at the end of the TV series, and then it's someone else, and then it's someone else, and then it's back to the Dark One, and then it's someone else, and then it's someone else, and then it's back to the Dark One, and it's sort of every one is an escalation in scale of the one before, and it all keeps coming back to the Dark One as like the source of all woe. So it's fairly well done.
Yeah,
but
and I think maybe there's also a reason there why they did Matt the way they did, because they invested time in establishing his character.
Yeah,
and they've left him kind of bad, perhaps tainted, and I think in the TV show, them sort of going back and trying to fix him is perfectly acceptable.
The TV show is going to say, "Wow, turns out the dagger from Shadow Logoth was way nastier than Moiraine realized it is."
Yeah,
and Matt wasn't cured. There, I fixed it, and I've pulled Moiraine down a peg or two, which needs to happen for the rest of the series to work.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think I agree with you. I think other than the last episode, I think it is a pretty good adaptation, even though it makes massive changes from the plots of the book because it stays true to the core themes of the book. I think.
Yeah, and having done it in reverse, obviously, I found that there was absolutely no clash because it always happens when you see something first, right? Then you picture those characters in the books as well, and that did not bother me at all.
I think that's true. I've not done. Is that true? No, I did Game of Thrones that way.
I did season 1 before you started reading them.
I saw the first few episodes of Game of Thrones and then read the book before the end of season 1.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, so it meant that when I was reading the books, I had these pictures of Ned and Jon and Arya and Robb and Tyrion and all of them in my head. So I don't get in the same way I don't get that like dissociation of, oh, that's not how I imagined it, because I've already done the imagining.
Yeah, for me, that's a testament to how good a lot of these adaptations are, right? Because I mean, I did read a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire before I watched it, but then those characters kind of impose themselves on you anyway. Same with Lord of the Rings. I mean, when I think of Aragorn, I just picture Viggo Mortensen now. It's
Yes.
because he's excellent.
Yeah. I guess one last thing that we were going to talk about. No, you're absolutely right. Just before we move on, I completely agree. I think the importance of casting. So Harry Potter is the same. Almost every character in Harry Potter, I picture their actor.
Harry Potter's a weird one for me. I sort of picture the actors, but changed.
Taken to a little extreme.
Yeah, because there is a lot of differences between some of the characters and the actors in Harry Potter. Right?
That's true.
So Harry, I do sort of picture Daniel Radcliffe, but with the hair being much wilder.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. Like,
actually, it's mainly the hair for all.
Hermione's hair,
Ron's hair,
Ron's hair, and Ron's
the
height
Weasleys are
as
nowhere
well.
near red enough.
They're not red enough, and Ron isn't like lanky and gangly enough.
Yeah, but that's a gamble, right? When you cast an actor at 11.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and they did very well casting 11-year-olds who became Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They did that very well.
Yeah,
but yeah, Rupert Grint is a very broad man to be described as a lanky ginger. Last one that we've got on our list, which is quite interesting. And so, video game adaptations.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd include the Netflix Witcher TV series in this. We were originally going to talk about Witcher versus Wheel of Time, but I think it's broader than that. Making video game films. The obvious ones that spring to mind for that are Tomb Raider films.
Yes. Or the Assassin's Creed film. I don't know if you've either played the game.
I have seen the Assassin's Creed film.
It's just awful.
It's so bad. It's Fassbender in a bad film, which I didn't think was possible.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there again. It's Fassbender in a film. The film is just bad. The original Tomb Raiders, or even the newer one, which is probably a little better actually, but it's Angelina Jolie or Alicia Vikander, and again they're just bad films.
Yeah, I quite liked the more modern Tomb Raider. The Angelina Jolie ones are just bad.
They're just bad. But why are they so bad?
I don't know. They're making a God of War film.
That's going to be bad.
It's going to be bad, isn't it?
Guarantee it. Other examples that you may not have seen, but that are absolute classics in my mind: the Tekken film and the Mortal Kombat film.
Super Mario Brothers.
Just
have you seen the Super Mario Brothers film? Have you seen Super Mario Brothers, where the big bad turns out to be a T-Rex?
I have not. That's amazing.
It's so good. You should go and watch it. It's unbelievably amazing. This isn't really a spoiler. Well, it probably is, but the big bad's plot is to develop a de-evolution laser.
Amazing.
To essentially turn humanity back into pro-Magnum man. The Super Mario Brothers, who are genuinely just Italian-American plumbers from New York, turn the laser on the big bad, but it turns out that his ancestors weren't Cro-Magnon man, they were a T-Rex. Wow. I mean, the film is awful, but also amazing.
I think with video game to film adaptations, if the studios just go, only the geeks are going to watch this, so we're going to get their money anyway. We don't actually need to bother making a good film.
The Warcraft film?
Never seen that, actually.
That's disappointing, because it has all of the... I'm going to get this wrong. It feels like it has all the constituent parts of a decent fantasy romp, and they just put them together in the wrong order and left out a crucial piece like the glue.
Amazing.
It's just weird and bad. And it's got Travis Fimmel from Vikings in it as the lead, and everyone else has like a cut glass British accent, except for him. And it doesn't make sense because he's meant to be from the same country as all of them.
Amazing. It's just weird that they can't make any good
I
games.
don't
Well,
understand.
saying that, have you seen the Uncharted film?
I haven't, although you haven't said it was good.
I actually really like that as a film. Yeah. And I
So,
didn't hate the adaptation at all. So maybe we've turned a corner.
maybe. I hold out hope for God of War because that has the potential to be sort of an excellent cinematic epic.
Yeah,
Right.
it's gonna be shit.
But it's just going to be crap. It's just going to be shit because they're going to try and make the Blades of Chaos work, and they're not going to work, and they're not going to be able to get the sort of self-loathing that Kratos needs. And they'll just cast the wrong person, or they'll cast the right person, and they'll just do it badly.
Yeah,
Or
because
they'll
it relies on
cast
CGI a lot, right? To
does
get those gods.
rely on a lot of CGI. Or they'll cast Dwayne Johnson, and it'll be flawless.
As much as I love Dwayne Johnson and everything, he is not Kratos.
he's too smiley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I don't know. Maybe. You mentioned The Witcher. The Witcher, I think, is a very interesting one, right? Because that's a book series turned into a game series, turned into a TV series. And quite honestly, I would not want to be the people in charge of making the TV show because you're never going to please, fans of the books and the games.
They've stuck to the books mostly, haven't they? I've not read the books.
They're not really sticking to anything.
Fair enough.
I think it's you can almost tell that they're not really sure.
Okay.
What to do? So yeah, I think they're more aligned with the books for sure. But
But the benefit of The Witcher is, I guess, Geralt's job and background and all of that lends itself to a sort of supernatural-esque monster of the week. Geralt turns up in village. There's a monster. Geralt has an adventure and kills the monster. Rinse and repeat. And Henry Cavill oozes charisma, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. In that bit of it worked 100%. But then they're like, oh, yeah, but we should also include Ciri, and we should also include Yennefer, and we should also make it into the saga that the books covered. And then they're like, oh, yeah, but we've lost the episodic monster bashing now.
But that was always what made Supernatural bad. Or not bad. Less good. Was when it tried to go into that overarching story rather than let's just have two charismatic actors take out monsters every week.
Yeah. And well, I mean that's always a difficult thing to do, right? Because even shows like Buffy, I think so much of it is just the week on week thing, and then the sort of overarching plot rumbles in the background.
And then you have a end of season finale that's seldom as good as just the random episodes in the season.
We should really do a Buffy or a Supernatural episode for that.
Oh, I'm starting to rewatch Supernatural, and it's just so overwhelming. There's so much of it.
There's a lot of it. That's what scares me about it as well. Yeah,
I think I'm going to watch like maybe the first 4 or 5 seasons of Supernatural, and then I'm just going to stop. Just going to get off the train. I think if I'm right in remembering that Supernatural, the big bad escalates through the first like 4 or 5 seasons till you get to Lucifer. And once you've done Lucifer, stop going bigger. Just stop. So that's when I'm going to get off.
Maybe what we should do is so you watch until that point. I'll jump in after that point.
That would be really funny.
I'll tell you what I think happened to get to that point.
That would be very, very funny. So just conscious that we've been rambling for a long time again. To pull it back to Rings of Power, having had this discussion, what do they need to do to make a good adaptation of the appendices to The Lord of the Rings?
I think if you make it visually very appealing,
yes,
a la Wheel of Time, it looks great. A la Lord of the Rings, looks fantastic.
Yeah,
you can forgive a multitude of sins, and then just make interesting characters that actually have story arcs that are coherent.
Yeah,
and stick with it.
So make a good TV series.
Make a good TV series.
I think that is actually the takeaway, though. Like I was being slightly facetious there, but I think the takeaway is it'll be good if it's good. The fact
No,
that
but
it's
that is 100% the conclusion. Yeah,
the fact that it's got the Lord of the Rings or the Tolkien stamp on it doesn't change the basic calculation of did you make a good TV series or not. And if you did make a good TV series, well done. You made a good Lord of the Rings TV series. You're going to print money now. And if you made a bad one, you made a bad Lord of the Rings TV series, and people will shout at you for the rest of your life. So maybe it's just that the stakes are higher.
well, I think that's right. But you just go in making, ultimately trying to make a good piece of entertainment
with the benefit that someone's done all of the world building
all the legwork
for you, and you've got a pre-made audience.
You got a pre-made audience. Well, that's possibly a double-edged sword.
Yes, that is.
But I think just go with it, and then like Jackson did. If you think, why not have elves at Helm's Deep? It's a rogue choice,
but it works in the context of the film.
It does, yeah. I know a lot of people hate it, but I think it works. I think it's perfect cinema.
I think it works. I think it damages the Rohirrim slightly because the point of Helm's Deep is that the Rohirrim throw back Saruman on their own at the end. But I like the idea that the elves are reminded that they are part of this world. It's the same "you're part of this world" speech that Merry gives to Treebeard. I think that's like a theme that's running through Two Towers.
Yeah, and it's a way of sort of doing Elladan and Elrohir when they
is also a way of doing Elladan and Elrohir. That's very true. I hadn't thought about that.
It's like we they kind of did it, but did it differently, and I think it works. So just as you say, make good content. Like Expertise is Overrated, Absolutely. And then you'll be fine.
I've just been reminded. I don't really want to talk about it because it hurts, but I've just been reminded of another bad adaptation. Looking over at my bookshelf, are you familiar with Terry Goodkind's The Sword of Truth series?
No.
Right. Don't read it because I read it as a kid and went, "Ooh, this is really cool." And then if you go back and read it as an adult, you realise that Terry Goodkind worships at the altar of Ayn Rand, and it's quite unpleasant. It's like Atlas Shrugged in a fantasy world. It's awful. It's genuinely horrendous. But I think Sci-Fi made a adaptation called The Legend of the Seeker, and oh my god, is it bad? And it's so bad, and it's bad because you get the sense that the people. It comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's just restating this point with another media, but the people making the series either didn't know or didn't care enough about the source material. So they went, "Oh, we got some ready-made characters. Let's just throw them into weekly adventures." A la Xena. It's very like Xena in its sort of episodic nature. But it's just it's not the characters from the series, which is in a way good because the characters from the series are awful. But yeah, don't do that.
Okay, so I won't.
Don't read it. Don't watch it. Just bad.
I mean, I don't even remember, but one sort of the opposite of that, I think, in terms of adaptations where they've kind of thrown the source material out the window, is the Bourne trilogy.
I don't know the books.
The books are excellent, don't get me wrong, but they cover a completely different plot altogether compared to films. And those films are arguably the best action films ever made. So, well done. I'm sticking to that.
I don't have an instant rebuttal, so we'll just leave that one lying.
Maybe we'll come back to that at some point. And perhaps on that Bourne-shaped bombshell, we should end. And so, Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Expertise is Overrated. No doubt we've said some things that were either objectively wrong or downright offensive. As ever, feel free to let us know. Rate the podcast and leave us a comment or drop us an email at expertiseisoverrated@gmail.com. Tweet us at @zeroexpertise. Check out our website, expertiseisoverrated.podbean.com, or come join us on our Discord server.
If you're lucky, we might just argue with you in one of our upcoming episodes. And if you're really lucky, we might call you an idiot. Now, as ever, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, where we'll be revisiting our old forte, making lists. So join us as we rank the top 10 duellists in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. Join us then for more nonsense.